Welcome again to the ILI History Makers Leadership Podcast. I am Nori Valtrindaji, Vice President for Training at ILI. Today, we have one more of our global leader interviews where we have a conversation about leadership and about life with one of our leaders. And today, we have our friend Ludwig Schemper, as he taught me how to say his name somewhat, from South Africa. Ludwig leads a ministry that serves the body of Christ and helps to proclaim the gospel in the African continent. Many years ago, probably 15 years ago, one of our local pastors here in Carrollton, pastor of Midway Church, Todd Wright, talked about this ministry in Africa, introduced us to its president at the time, Steve Mann, and we have been walking together since then, since back those days. And Ludwig is the president and CEO of the organization, and today we're going to talk about leadership. You can see that he is young, like ILI's president, and so we're going to, I believe our conversation is going to be a little bit about the challenges of being a young leader in charge of an organization. But let me stop talking and introduce you to Ludwig. Ludwig, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us your life story. Where do you come from in life, and all of that, so that we get to know you a little better.
And thank you, Norval, just for your time and for all those that are watching. It's such a privilege to be here at the ILI studio just to discuss a pressing need worldwide for young leaders just to rise up for where God has called them. So I'm just grateful to be here and spend this time with an incredible ministry that we're grateful for. So just for myself a little bit, you getting my name right, that's just very good. I'm not going to say the Afrikaans way of saying it, because that is sounds a bit harsh, Ludwig. But I'm grateful just to talk a bit about my background and a bit about myself. I was born in South Africa, that's why I'm South African. But I grew up in Zimbabwe, actually, on a farm. This is where God formed me, it's where God called me. And this is where my background is, in rural Zimbabwe, in the church there, on the farm, with these people.
And your father is a solid Christian, a farmer, and a man with a passion also for the gospel and for those who don't know Jesus, isn't it?
That's great. Yes, I come from actually a lineage of people that are Christian. My grandfather was a full gospel pastor and leader for the South African branch many years. And my father did go to seminar, but then God called him to the farm, and he's been a farmer. My mom is also a dedicated Christian, where she's running an orphanage in Zimbabwe and a mission school till to this day. So I am grateful for having a Christian heritage and actually going to a Christian homeschool most of my upbringing.
And when did you get a sense that God wanted you to be full-time in ministry as opposed to continuing to farm your father's property?
It was more of a journey, the calling. I am an introvert by nature, and growing up on a farm and being homeschooled didn't help that really very much. I was confronted by God for my spiritual state or my salvation when I was 15 years old at a youth camp. And this is where I dedicated my life to Jesus and discovered that God is incredible because He's not someone that you just read about. He's someone that you can speak to and He speaks back. I encountered that God is living and is powerful. And that excitement, that fire then started to ignite within me. So I couldn't help it but start to reach out to the local church and immediately started to organize youth camps where I said, I can't preach, I'm not very good at speaking in front of people, but what I can do is I can organize it and can bring people together. And that's where it started. And a journey that led me to later on when I was finished with school, when I had to answer the question, what am I going to do with my life? God then just impressed through different people and confirmations and stuff that, this is what I'm calling you to do full time, is reach out to people.
Okay. Have you pastored churches or are you pastoring a church right now?
I am an ordained minister, so I have pastored churches, planted churches, been involved in different capacities and different ministries. Right now, I am not currently leading or part of a ministerial team at a local church.
So, family, you're married, I know, and you have two beautiful children, and you can't wait to go back to them because you've been in the U.S. for a while, right?
That's correct. I am married to Leah, who is my wife, as well as two small kids, a daughter who's 2 years old and our son who is now turning 7.
And you told us your wife is Swiss,
Yes, she's originally from Switzerland.
from Switzerland. Tell us how you met her. I was curious about it, and so I'll ask you on our podcast.
Well, that is a longer story, but the short of it is that her parents were traveling in different locations in Africa and working with mission hospitals. So their mission hospital that they were working with in the early 90s happened to be very close to the farm. And so our families then became family friends, and it just grew from there.
She is a physician, right?
Yes, she's a practicing medical doctor.
Medical doctor. Wonderful. What a beautiful testimony. And so you also told me in another conversation that you became involved with multi-ministries in Zimbabwe and became one of the leaders of the organization, maybe the leader of the representative of multi-ministries in Zimbabwe. But what is multi-ministries? Tell us a bit about the history of this organization. What is it that you do? Or historically, what is it that multi-ministries did? And then we're going to talk a little bit about your tenure as the executive director of the organization. So.
All right. So multi-ministries was started by Harold Peasley in 1993 in Cape Town, along with a various team that he had with him that had a passion to see young leaders, or I don't know if the emphasis was necessarily young leaders, but leaders in Africa so that God can send them out to evangelize and disciple and plant churches. So they started out there and they started to grow and work from there. Reverend Peasley then gave over to Pastor Steve Mann, who then later on handed over the baton to me in 2024.
Yes, Steve Mann is the man who introduced us to multi-ministries. On a practical sense, what were some of the activities that were the most significant that multi-ministries historically did and maybe does it to this day?
Historically, I think multi-ministries has gone through different phases where different aspects of ministry were focused on in those periods. There has always been a part of evangelization, of mobilization of Christian resources to help with that. There's always been an outreach arm for relief, for helping with people that are homeless or food. Orphanage has always played a big part of that. There's always been a part of leadership development or encouraging the saints, as it is like that. But I think just before we go further on, it might be relevant also for me to mention how I started with multi-ministries. And I think there's something interesting then for RLI in that from the very beginning that I started the journey with multi-ministries, I stepped into helping to organize stuff for RLI when I started. So Steve Mann approached me in the late 2014, early 2015 through a mutual friend. It's incredible how God, can connect things and people where you might not realize the importance of that connection or that person, and many years later, God just weaves things together. So that was one of those stories where I did not know Steve Mann from before, and through a mutual friend, he just called me, and I happened to be in South Africa, in Lutrichard, at that stage, and he called me and said, can we just meet? And we started to talk about it, and that's where he then asked, can you just then become the Zimbabwe coordinator for multi-ministries? I then accepted that, and one of my first tasks was to organize a national History Makers convention in 2015, where we had a number of people come, and that journey then led forward. And till today.
And that's one of the reasons you're here. We are having conversations about continuing to equip leaders through the History Makers training in the context of the countries where Multi-Ministries operates. In fact, last year we had you promoted a significant event with leaders from several countries in Africa, right? And tell us a little bit about that. What was the impact of that that you believe for the leaders?
Absolutely. That was about two years ago, and that was the end of 1.5 years ago. And we came together as a leadership of Multi-Ministries right after I took over from Steve Mann. And Multi-Ministries then was at the 30-year time period of existence, and we were facing the question of, should Multi-Ministries exist, and why should Multi-Ministries exist? After some soul searching, we came to the answer that we definitely feel that there is a need and a space for a platform for young leaders to be equipped and to be sent out for where God has called them. So once we answered that question, we started to build on the how that is supposed to look. Naturally, with my exposure and my work with ILI, I was impressed by the core values that ILI champions, and believe that Multi-Ministries going forward really needs these core values to be at the core of what we do, so that we can stay the course and stay true to what Jesus has called us to be. I believe that this is one of the big things in Africa, maybe in the world, is that you have a lot of leaders with a lot of skills and anointing, and there's a lot going on, but not everyone has the right kind of core values that anchors them to what Jesus needs to do in the communities. So that's when we then organized at that national convention that you were mentioning, where we brought together all the people that were in Multi-Ministries as leaders, potential leaders, or ones that we were raising up, and just everyone that we could get from the different countries to sit down and instill in them the core values that were important to us, as well as taking advantage of the vision casting element of the History Makers journey, so that it can help Multi-Ministries as a whole, but also each individual leader to identify so that they run with what God has called them to do. And there's incredible testimonies just from that one. We have a young leader from, if I can just mention just a testimony from that specific event, we have a young leader from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania that was there, that was the turning point in his ministry. He got things right with his family priority. He focused more on intimacy with God so that God could fill him up. And from there on, he has had an incredible growth, seeing the power of God, baptisms, and just God is preparing him for a big season that is to come from that event.
What a blessing. But you mentioned something that has been a conversation here at ILI. We call it, Daniel kind of coined the term, the leadership gap, or he heard it somewhere, but we are using it.
Yep.
There is a gap, not a lack of persons. You said something, there are a lot of leaders. People, maybe we need more leaders, but there are leaders. The issue is, and a lot of times they are skilled or they are charismatic. What is lacking is Christ-like character, is that foundation of core values. Now, we have been having this conversation. Is that something? Speak a little bit about that in an African context, and particularly in a South African context, because one of the unique things about you and Multi-Ministries is to see a ministry of Africans for Africans. Right? So a lot of our audience is in the West, and so we're used to, from our part of the world to the African context. But you are Africans to Africans, right? Is that a challenge? Is that something you see in Africa? Speak a little bit about the major challenges of leadership in Africa What does the gap look like in the African context?
I think if I have to think in that way, the challenges that leaders, not just young leaders, but all leaders in Africa face, not just in ministry, but just Christian leaders that are in Africa. For often when people think of Africa, you think of poverty, you think of, maybe there's some big things. Of course, we need more leaders. Of course, there's terrible poverty. Of course, there's a lot of ministries that could do with more finances, but some of these challenges are worldwide. And I believe that the greatest challenge that leaders in Africa face, and this is part of, if you go into our website and stuff, this is part of what we want to try and address, is that there is an orphan spirit that the leaders face in Africa. That through circumstances, through the prevailing spirit in Africa, they have forgotten their identity in Jesus Christ. They have forgotten that I am doing this before Jesus, in Jesus, because of Jesus. And so that losing that focus of who they are causes leaders to start preaching a gospel that is self-focused or focused on, finances. So there is a lot of that going in Africa, where leaders think, if only I can build a bigger structure, if only I can have a little bit more money, then I can buy a better sound system. If only I had this, if only I had a bit more degrees or qualifications, somehow forgetting that all these other things, some of them might be good and they're tools and resources, but the most important thing that many miss is that I am a child of God and I anchor myself in Jesus. And when I run with that, even when I don't have the finances, and even when I don't have necessarily the skills or the resources or the connections so much, I can be victorious in the community and the calling that God has called me. So I would signal now that is the biggest challenge for me personally. What I've seen is losing sight of who I am in Jesus Christ as a leader.
Wow, that is incredible, because a lot of times you talk. I've heard what you're saying. We talk to leaders in Africa, and the challenge is they don't have resources. It's difficult to connect. It's difficult to do this or that. But what you're talking about something that is in me, that is, and it has to do with my intimacy with God. It has to do with my experience of God, of knowing God, not about God. So, wow. I think that is a very impressive insight. Now, we need to address the elephant in the room here. You are a 34, 35-year-old leader, 36-year-old leader, assuming leadership in an organization that is older, much older than you, twice your age, right? Oh, no, twice. Almost as old as you. Almost. You're 30. You're 36. Organization is 30 years old. So you were probably in primary school by when this organization was started.
I was 4 years old when it was started.
4 years old when it was started. And just yesterday, I told you this before we started recording, I had a conversation with a Mozambican leader who sought me for mentoring. He just got married. He is 32, 33 years old, and he's the pastor of a church. And I believe his church is an Assemblies of God church. I think it's a pretty good sized church, because every church that I've been in the cities in Mozambique are significant. They're not huge, but they're large. And it could be that he has more than 1,000 leaders. So you have this young man leading, and he said, and I asked him, I said, what is your biggest challenge? What do you want us to talk about? He wants me to be a mentor to him. And he says, my greatest challenge is he calls the adults, the older members of my church. If I'm doing a wedding or if I'm doing a funeral, they all look at me like, what is this kid doing here? He doesn't have any white hair. He is too young and there is and I've been in Africa enough to know that a white beard like what I have or gray hair is very much valued in the African context, which is good, but to the detriment of younger leadership.
Yeah.
So, is that something that you face in your leadership, and what can you tell us about what it means to be a 36-year-old leading in a country where 72 years old are considered more respectful or than youngers?
I think for myself, first of all, for myself, of course, there is always the challenge when you step into a role like that of expectations. So often expectations are set by what people can see and what people can, measure, but not realizing the call of God in our lives. Like when Samuel was setting expectations when he was looking at the brothers of David, according to what he could see. And sometimes what we see is right and sometimes not. But with myself, I think I'm grateful to Pastor Steve Mann for being part of the transition of multi-ministries from him to myself. I think the unique position that multi-ministries found itself had its challenges and its advantages, because there was very little leadership that was there, many personnel and people, just because of the unique situation that we found ourselves in. So we built a lot from scratch, which has its advantages, because then you don't face so much pushback from this is how we used to do it, this is how we should do it. The challenge then was more for me to build it from zero, if I can put it like that. Although it was more the transition that God was building in multi-ministries. On the wider ministry level, when you talk about young leaders facing the challenges of being accepted or believed in or given space to run, of course, this is then what multi-ministries sees a lot. I saw this in my upbringing in the church I grew up in. I grew up in a Pentecostal church, African Pentecostal church. I speak Shona fluently, which is the main local language in Zimbabwe. And this is where I did definitely see it. This is part of what inspired me to do the work I do in multi-ministries, is that you have young leaders that have been called by God, but you don't have senior leaders or intentionality in the structures to believe in them, to build them up. And I think that goes both ways, is that young leaders need to be open to mentorship. There can be a spirit of rebellion, of course, where they don't want to listen to advice. But then there can also be there's a big part of the senior leaders where they, for different reasons, don't invest and build up and give the space, for young leaders, like that one in Mozambique.
Yes, absolutely. I love the idea of generations working together. One of the things that I appreciate most about our president, who is your age, by the way,
Yep.
Is that respect, and that he and I work very well together, because I'm all about passing the baton to the next generation, but I'm not ready to quit either. So I want to have a voice, and he on his side wants to hear my voice.
Yeah.
So I think that's the secret sauce is maybe in my relationship to Daniel and your relationship to Steve, is to be able to work together to build up an organization. Obviously, you're not only a younger leader, but you're also a leader that is bringing significant change. Was that your initiative, or was that like a joint initiative of different generations to rethink as you do the soul search, as you call it?
I think a large part of some of the practical stuff and technical stuff Steve Mann was already setting up, because he took over from someone else. And it was a combination of preparation, the timing of God, and then being obedient in the new season. So a lot of what's in multi-ministries right now was initiated by myself and the team that I work with, where I think God wanted to strip multi-ministries to a point where it was to the foundation, and then rebuild it from there on. So I need to give credit to where credit is due, where Pastor Steve Mann did put, almost like David put some foundational stuff, preparation. But when I came in, then it was at such a point where we could restructure and rebuild it completely to what the next season of multi-ministry should look like.
Wow. I love that comparison, David, because David, that's what he did. He prepared everything for the building of the temple, and Solomon was the one who executed it. And in a way, I see that the two generations working together. So, what does the future look like for you, for multi-ministries, and in a broad sense for the church in Africa? How do you see it?
Wow, those are some very big questions to answer. But for multi-ministries, definitely our future is in continuing to build out the vision of God. A lot of work has been put into, like I said, in the restructuring. So the theory part, a lot of work went into how this should look. And now the future is now doing that, getting the stuff done, a number of initiatives that we're launching, number of projects, collaboration, so much that is now starting to spin off from that, starting in Southern Africa. So that is definitely the future for us at Multi-Ministries, is now definitely continuing to build the theory side and the foundational stuff, because the vision is very big. For us, if we are to raise up generations and change the narrative of leadership in nations across the whole continent of Africa, there should be a strong foundation to do it. So we'll continually be building on the practical and foundational stuff. But now going forward is just to accelerate as the maturity of the leadership, as the vision is caught by the different leaders, as we build relationships going forward. I think the church in Africa itself has a number of issues it faces. It faces resurgent Islamic jihadists that are increasing, highly financed from the oil-rich countries in the Middle East. You see animism or witchcraft that is definitely making a comeback, as some people mix Christianity with witchcraft. And I have a deep knowledge of the way I grew up and the churches I planted with the power of witchcraft in Christianity. So the church in Africa definitely faces a challenge when it comes to that. Definitely the church in Africa faces a big challenge from, I think the word prosperity gospel is bashed too much by the world, but there is an element where the church is losing focus of the main thing and making blessings and, a good life the main thing. Too much. And that's a whole discussion for another time. But these are some of the elements I believe that's creeping in and trying to get a hold of the young generation. And the young generation is susceptible to these because of the challenges in the economies and the countries and politically that is happening.
Okay. Well, thank you. It was a real good conversation. It's good to understand better what you do, and in understanding what you do, understand the challenges of Christianity in Africa. And I go back to what we talked about in the beginning, that identity issue.
Yeah.
To me, is the biggest takeaway for me, is that issue of identity in Christ as the major crisis of leadership today. Thank you for sharing that. Is there anything you would like else to say? Anything we didn't say that you feel compelled, or maybe a message to a young leader like you out there, wherever they are, from an emerging leader from Southern Africa. You have.
Yes, if I could speak to someone today that is watching this, and you are an emerging leader, you are called by God. We invite you, of course, to go onto our website and follow us on social media. We believe that leaders are people of influence, and this could be in ministry, this could be in the marketplace, this could be in the community, wherever God has called you. We welcome you just to connect with us and see, how we can help you. But if I can say something, is root yourself in Christ. You don't need everything that you see on YouTube. You don't need everything that you think you do. You already have everything that you need in Jesus, and run with that. Don't necessarily listen to the lies of the enemy. Who you are is not what they say, but who He says that you are. That is Jesus Christ. But be open to advice. God is calling you for a time like this. Africa's time is now to stand up on the world stage and be a voice of truth and light in changing times. God's calling you for this time. Rise up and be a blessing of change in your community.
Wow. Thank you for this message. Oh, okay. All the information about multi-ministry, their social, their website and everything will be on the show notes. Please check it out. It is worth it. I've been there. There's a contact form. You can drop them a note saying you're interested in knowing more about what they do and how they do it. Particularly if you are in Africa, then the connection will be made. And who knows? Maybe some people that are watching us today or in the future will be able to sharpen their tools and their identity in Christ by participating with you and with History Makers. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ludwig. Thank you for being with us. It was an honor to talk to you. Now, if you are interested, if you are a leader and you want to develop yourself, you have that challenge. You want to build your identity in Christ. The 8 core values that God has revealed to ILI many years ago can help you do just that. Go to iliteam.org and get in touch with us. We will be glad to direct you wherever you are in the world to our leaders that may be able to equip you and challenge you and mobilize you to lead like you've never led before, but under the leadership of the Holy Spirit, to accelerate the spread of the gospel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.